Spoiler warning. This video contains huge spoilers. So if you don't want to know about that specific scene with the golf club, you might want to turn off now. Trigger warning. Some of my Call of Duty footage contains some harrowing and disturbing scenes of extreme camping, which some viewers might find upsetting. Oh Lord, 2020. What a year for video games. While some years are overshadowed by scandals concerning microtransactions, loot boxes, pricing scams and dysfunctional products, in 2020 the biggest problem seemed to boil down primarily to one issue. AAA studios made a lot of bad video games. The ongoing issues of China's pernicious influence and political wokeness being jammed down people's gullets continue. But 2020 really was defined by its absence of good games and the abundance of good old-fashioned bad product. I think at this point it's safe to say that most people appreciate that any discussion of video games will by its very nature be subjective. If that thought has never crossed your mind, you might get your knickers properly bunched up when I wail on some game you love. So if I start bashing on The Last of Us 2 and it's one of your favourite games, please try and embrace the concept that divergence in opinions is a good and healthy thing, unlike having an Abbey tattoo, which is proper sketchy. To any newcomers to the channel, you should be aware that our lords and masters in Silicon Valley are not great fans of my work. My videos are rarely suggested, frequently demonetised and routinely missing from notifications when I publish. Don't even get me started on the fact that YouTube also likes to go the extra mile by quietly unsubscribing my followers. So please, if you value my filth and fury, subscribe. Check the notifications bell is active. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Patreon, because following is free, and keep an eye out in case you get unsubbed. And perhaps most importantly, tell a couple of people about my channel, like your frail old nan, or your religious or spiritual advisor. They will love this shit. Trust me. I will quickly give a few honourable mentions to games that I did not play, but are nevertheless bad enough to have come on my radar regardless. Elder Scrolls Blades on Switch. Bethesda is increasingly trying to double down on shit, over-monetised, cash grab apps and games. They're like some crazy drug dealer who cuts their product with scouring powder, talc and rat poison. Only at some point they got up in the morning and realised, hey, let's just sell bags of scouring powder. We can still charge the same price, right? Hopefully, now that they wrecked their reputation for a big cash sellout to Xbone, some nice lady or gentleman from Microsoft will take an Uber over to Bethesda, sit them down in a room and quietly say, please stop with all the fuckery and start doing something useful instead. But I doubt it. Valorant. Shit game, shit monetisation, shit de novo anti-cheat. It's shit. I don't even play the game, but it certainly looks like a CSGO knockoff that only exists as a microtransaction delivery mechanism. I know it wasn't technically released in 2020, but it is a live service game, and they haven't actually finished it yet, so I reckon they deserve an honourable mention at least. The Division 2. The live service video game equivalent of a seaside town magic show where some tired old geezer pulls out the same old tricks every Saturday afternoon with such repetition that the kids all shout out what's about to happen next before he can even finish the tricks. But for those kids unfamiliar with the Division franchise, here is the basics of the magic show. Hype the shit out of it in the 6 months before it's released. Incentivise a bunch of content creators and anyone with a decent social media footprint to rave about it pre-launch. Release an unfinished mess, spend 3 years bullshitting about how they're working on it, rapidly sell microtransactions and loot boxes, never fix the game, rinse and repeat. There you go, now you don't need to buy the Division 3, 4 or 5. Frankly, I said this would happen during the Division 1 life cycle, so technically nobody even needed to buy the second one either. God, I hate being right. Well, now we have the small floaters flushed away, we can get to grips with the fatbergs that are blocking the entire sewage network. Here are the nominations for Worst Game of 2020. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. It actually feels strange ripping on this game because, on certain specific levels, the Call of Duty franchise is at least a staple of the yearly video game releases and has done fine work over the years. Some of the campaigns have been great, and there is no denying that they are at least one of the industry standards for first-person shooters. However, as much as the game modes and campaigns are evolving, their ethical and monetary practices are devolving. And this year, it was atrocious on all fronts. A perpetual cycle of predatory FOMO-based microtransactions. It's got the most uninspired and ridiculous gun modding I've ever seen, outside of the Division franchise. It's chock full of bugs that never seem to get fixed. Sometimes you get bumped out at the end of matches and can't see the action report or report cheaters anymore. And because everything is now always online, always monitoring, always grabbing your profile data from their servers and all your personal data from your gaming rig, you can't even inspect a fucking gun camo without waiting a few seconds for the game to ping some shit-ass bargain bucket server in Uzbekistan. And on top of all of this, the game launched with practically zero anti-cheat. What the actual fuck? They just slapped on a bit of something that might stop free hacks that a 9-year-old might use, but nothing that is going to stop any serious cheater. And recent academic research into online video games has shown that the term serious cheater now accounts for about 1/3 of Call of Duty players. Call of Duty is now a first world game with third world support, where more money is going into designing weapons and character skins, and the psychologists and gambling specialists hired to manipulate you into buying them, than supporting the damn game itself. But at least you can be transgender in the single player game, because that makes absolutely no sense at all. It's not like in the 80s, just being gay got your security clearance revoked. Let's just rewrite history so Activision can keep that blue tick on its account, whilst it sells gambling to kids and fails to fix such a basic thing as baseline functionality. During the Cold War, having a gay relative could get your security clearance revoked. I am unconvinced that someone could have rocked up to Langley in 1981, demanded that everyone use their preferred pronouns, and then tried to get the CIA director cancelled because he accidentally called you dude whilst trying to be friendly. How about we embrace and accept society's inequalities in the past so that we can learn from our mistakes and do better moving forward? Alternatively, we can just have a giant fucking book burning and start lying about the past, like one huge hard reboot of the collective consciousness. What could possibly go wrong with that plan? Oh yeah. Oh, and that. And that too. On top of all of these crimes, Activision is also continuing to allow its Chinese business partners to exert more influence over its games content. When I say business partners, I am of course referring to the publicity department of the Chinese Communist Party, formerly known by the slightly more chilling but much more accurate name, the Chinese Propaganda Department. I guess it's some consolation that at least there's some record of China fiddling on Wikipedia, for now. The invisible hand of the People's Republic of China's Ministry of Propaganda once again exerted its steady push to rewrite history in a way to make China look more modern than it really was. Ah yes, Activision, a corporation that will literally sell out its values to appease the Chinese government, once again did a little bit of historical revision for its Chinese overlords. The game was part made in Activision's Shanghai studios, which no doubt only exists as part of the conditions of doing business within mainland China, so the Chinese motherland gets to keep an eye on any and all representations of China and its organ-stealing, bioweapon-spilling, slave-labouring image. This video game was set in 1981, and nearly all of the weapons in the game are rightly from around that period. However, the one Chinese assault rifle in the game, the QBZ-83, is a lie. This rifle seems to be some kind of deliberately vague reference to previous experimental rifles designed to muddy the waters of history and create confusion over the early Norinco Type 86 and several other early Chinese assault weapons, none of which were ever in military service, some of which were experimental, and most of which were not even bullpups. The QBZ-83 in-game is a Norinco QBZ-95 series bullpup, which at best only started to go into limited service in the People's Republic of China in 1997. I'm not even convinced that that information on the Wikipedia entry can be trusted. The idea of combatants running around in 1981 using China's most modern 21st century assault rifle is pure propaganda of the highest order. In 1981, the People's Liberation Army were still using the worst AK variant in history, the Type 56. It was made in a plough factory, guaranteed to have rusted before being delivered, and came with loose rivets rattling around in the box. Part of the fun was working out which bits were missing. In 1981, China was most famous for drugging its Olympic athletes, beating Tibetan monks, and killing protesters. Being the first military power to roll out bullpups? I don't think so. That accolade, I believe, goes to France. So don't be fooled by Activision's sucking up to China. If this game was being realistic about Chinese weaponry, you'd be shooting the worst Chinese knockoff copy of a Kalashnikov and probably using the bayonet a lot of the time because the fucking thing had jammed. China in the 1980s was busy making pot metal kettles that usually contained about 20% lead and cycling around a lot. This is China in the 1980s. Funny, I don't see any high-tech 21st century bullpup assault rifles in this picture. Fuck, an AK-47 would look modern in this shot. I have passed a few hours playing this game and I can't deny the small map PvP is enjoyable, but as a commercial video game enterprise, it's horrible. And Activision needs to pull its head out of China's vice-like arse. Watch Dogs Legion, the Brexit insurgency simulator. We live in incredibly strange and unstable times. Trust in corporately corrupted mainstream media is virtually non-existent. And for good reason. We're experiencing an inversion of values, and the importance of credible evidence and truth is now seen as almost irrelevant. As irrelevant as the consequences for being caught red-handed telling shamefaced lies. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, politicians, CEOs and public officials who deceived the public, if they didn't resign themselves, were immediately fired and then investigated. These days, they shrug it off, because facts are entirely subjective and political, apparently. Imagine trying to build bridges and houses where politics was more important than facts and science. Oh yeah, they do that all the time in China, and that shit tends to fall down. Fact checkers are now censoring truths and supporting lies according to political agendas and not evidence. A country spends all year burning and looting, but the press describes it as peaceful protests. Antifa is dishing out brain injuries with bike locks, and politicians deny they even exist. So why wouldn't Ubisoft consider this the perfect opportunity to make an insurgency simulator set in a fictional version of London where everyone is a miserable racist and your job is to overthrow the democratically elected government because they are bad people? And if there is one lesson we are ordered to learn in 2020, it's that democracy is less important than attacking the bad people. And who are these alleged bad people? Well, apparently Silicon Valley is going to decide that for us from now on. Watch Dogs Legion is Ubisoft's magnum opus of hypocrisy, virtue signalling and bigotry. We're a corporation being investigated for systemic abuse, sexual abuse, covering up abuse, and drugging its staff, gets on its incredibly unstable and wobbly high horse and tries to shit on the English because apparently everyone in London is a bigoted racist, according to the rapists. Despite London being one of the most multicultural and ethnically diverse cities in Europe. This game is impressive in its vacuousness. You get to control a virtually unlimited amount of playable wankers, characters, nearly all of whom are cretins, annoying, stereotypes, or some combination thereof. And don't even mention the fact they only had a couple of voice artists doing all the voices for everybody in London. You kill, bomb and bludgeon your way through police officers and innocent civilians alike, and you do all of this to make the world a better place. On top of all of this stupidity, hypocrisy, nationalistic digs at the English and representation of the police as mere foot soldiers of fascism, on top of the monumentally moronic virtue signalling attempts to be down with the kids, whilst coming across like a grandad twerking at a wedding, the cack-handed fumbling with Brexit, racism and European politics. On top of all of these crimes, Watch Dogs Legion is also incredibly boring. Ubisoft is one of the few corporations that can make terrorism and insurgency tiresome and mundane. Just fucking wow. If Ubisoft really wants to make a game about Brexit, next time maybe they should create a military simulator, because those thieving bastards running the EU were perfectly happy to risk triggering armed conflict in Northern Ireland just to steal a few doses of vaccine. And you don't install the former head of the German military to run your trade organisation if you're focusing on trade and agriculture. I don't know what the EU are planning, but it's certainly not focusing on setting up market stalls and discussing food standards for fucking jam. It's a trading bloc that is now run by the former German Minister of Defence, and they shoehorned her into the position without a proper vote. Look, I'm not one of those Euro haters. I fucking love Europe. Fuck knows I should. I've spent a lot of time staying there over the years, and I can tell you this much. They have some of the loveliest and most considerate prison wardens I have ever encountered. They have some of the most luxurious prisons in the world, and their criminal justice system is forgiving. One prison even gave me a beer allowance, and in Finland they shipped me out to this holiday island. Europe is fucking cracking. They eat cakes for breakfast. There are cafes where you can get chonged, and they even have shops with prostitutes for sale. I love the place. Let's face it, nearly everywhere in Europe is less of a shithole than London. I am merely stating that specifically the leadership of the European Union as an organisation seems a little bit more focused on conflict than commerce right now. Which ain't great, considering all of our tanks and planes are stationed over there now I come to think of it. Watch Dogs Legion was lucky to be published in a year with so many shit games released, or it would be going home with all the awards. And let's not forget that some of those other shit games were published by Ubisoft too. Next time Ubisoft wants to make a hypocritical, preachy game about social politics, I have a suggestion for them. Ubisoft, the video game. Your character is a 20-year-old female intern, and you have to try and get in and out of the building and do your work unmolested, without getting drugged, sexually assaulted, or choked out against the wall by your boss. And if you complain to HR, they move your job to the other side of the world, so you have to resign. Game over. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Once again, we see Ubisoft raising the bar on video game generic boredom simulators. Only this time they slapped some Viking artwork on Ghost Recon Breakpoint, threw in a couple of assassins, and fucked you off to England, where once again Ubisoft, the global leader in institutionalised workplace fanny grabbing, portrayed the English as bad people. Because, you know, Ubisoft reckons it's got sufficient moral authority to judge anyone. I'm sorry, but an organisation that's famous for lying, fiddling with their own staff and selling gambling mechanics to kids should probably, perchance, be scrutinising their own moral barometer before judging others. Ubisoft, the Roman Polanski of the video game world, proved yet again that it can take any historical or fictional open world and turn it into a crushing fuck pile of depressing gig jobs and chores. Even the life of a Viking raider. And they banned you from killing civilians or doing any mean stuff in the game. Because apparently this is a Viking safe space now. It's pathetic. This game is so politically correct there are even rainbow and unicorn themed skins in the ever-present, ever-harassing, ever-foul and despicable in-game store. An in-game store that is like a festering buboss slowly necrotising on the side of your face. The shop never lets you forget it's there, its pestilential stench is never far from your nostrils, and they even carefully crafted endgame progress so that eventually you run out of things to do, so to fully max out your playthrough, many players will be forced to go and buy shite from the in-game store. Yes, endgame essential microtransaction gating. Wankers. Talk about punishing the people that love the game the most. I very much appreciate that some players enjoy this game because they like pootling around a beautiful historic world as a Viking, doing chores and being nice to locals. I guess some people just like to seek solace in this calming, picturesque Viking safe space. But personally, I'd rather play Red Dead Redemption 2 on PC over this any day of the week. To the game's credit though, at least it's a Ubisoft game that doesn't have loads of creepy World War II Nazi guns in it. That's a plus. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is an exercise in lazy, repetitive development and egregious monetization. But it's got Vikings, so there is that. Warcraft 3 Reforged. Once again, the video game industry is imitating the failures of the mainstream film industry and remaking classics. Remaking them worse than the originals. This time it was Warcraft 3's turn to get dragged backward into the swamp, chewed on by a gator, only to swim out later mangled and covered in shit and leeches. Falsely advertised and oversold, the images at BlizzCon looked like Warcraft the movie, but what the players got was Warcraft like Minecraft. The most significant enhancements seem to be they copyrighted any maps you might create with the map creator so that they own them. They downgraded a bunch of features, and that's all I could find. Typical of so many remasterings these days, it was a couple of afternoons of skin modders work with a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign slapped on top. Everyone's a winner, apart from any poor sucker that wasted their money on this game. I've been a huge fan of modding communities for years, especially the likes of Nexus Mods, etc. It's despicable that AAA publishers are doing vastly less than modders already provide for free, and charging people the price of a full game to do it. This is why so much anti-cheat software these days is actually targeting modding software. It's not about the mods and cheating, it's about stopping people making free content and distributing it. Because fucks like EA, Activision and Ubisoft want to do a worse job of adding content than the modders, but charge you through the nose for doing it. The yearly reskin generic sports franchise rip-offs. For the sake of ease, let's just roll all these shite titles into one giant EA and 2K Sports Frankenstein. They are each indistinguishable from the previous year's iteration, will be indistinguishable from next year's iteration, and if they didn't actually involve different sports, they would largely be indistinguishable from each other. Madden, NBA, FIFA, who fucking cares? Let's just pour them all into the toilet bowl together, give them a stir and flush them all down the shitter at the same time. Every year they reskin the teams, package everything important into loot boxes and pump out an abysmal septic bowel evacuation that shits in the faces of the players. And sadly, the mugs and whales who are still emotionally and most likely financially invested in this massive corporate piss take keep lapping it up. Seriously guys, it's time to think of your dignity and stop buying this shite. And if you're playing it on some kind of Game Pass, then dear Lord, don't spend any money on microtransactions. Look, I know some people who love their favourite sport so much they feel a need to play certain yearly money sponge parasitic video games. But maybe in 2021 exercise some self-discipline, save your money, stop letting them take the piss out of you, and maybe spend that money on a real football or something, and go and kick it around the park. Although you might have to wear a mask while you do it, subject to local lockdown regulations. If I can wear a military gas mask during sex, surely you can play a bit of football wearing a little face mask, right? The Avengers. This is what happens when AAA publishers become so confident in their ability to deceive gamers that they will literally sell a box of shit sandwiches with a 50 quid price tag on it. This is Square Enix's recipe so you can make your own shit sandwiches at home and save yourself some cash. Pay for the video game rights of a big franchise so you can capitalise on the brand. Make a half-assed, half-finished generic abortion of a non-game. Butter it liberally with slatherings of obnoxious microtransactions. Pay off a load of shill YouTubers and streamers to scream about how it's not shit. Pay off a load of celebrity shills like Brie Larson to scream about how it's not shit. Pay off some shill mainstream review sites to scream about how it's not shit. Shit the monstrosity into a box, throw it at the heads of your loyal customers, grab the money, and run before they realise that it is very shit. But I would note for the record, everybody with half an ounce of common sense and the tiniest little bit of knowledge about live service games saw the Avengers reveal and thought, this game is gonna be shit. One of the greatest video game publishers of all time brings you one of the most mind-boggling video game sequels ever made. Combining real-time strategy with combat, combining gambling app visual effects with first-person shooting, combining platforming with platform-based puzzles. Trade combat moves for bullets and armour. Be like a little dancing FPS monkey. It's like having your head rammed up a pachinko machine's arse, whilst an army of fucking squeakers ree at you and tell you to die of cancer if you don't like it. Welcome to Doom Eternal, the transactional first-person shooter trading game, where you exchange punches and attacks for bullets and armour, because they ran out of fucking ideas and just decided to be annoying instead. Did you really like the play shop they had in infant schools? You know, the ones where they teach kids about how shops work by trading plastic coins for plastic carrots? Well, if you did, you will thoroughly love Doom Eternal. Quake 2 was one of the best games I ever played. It was shit scary, atmospheric and genre defining. Doom Eternal, not so much. This is a game where you trade punches for, I think, bullets, a chainsaw attack for 7 armour, and 1 burn attack for a spare adult nappy or something. Fuck this. I normally refuse to buy microtransactions, but if this game had an ammunition DLC, I would buy it. Just give me some ammo. The most overrated game of 2020, fiercely defended by an army of zealot fanboys who think calling someone a spastic and making endless comments about Parkinson's disease qualifies as humour. Perhaps this shit flies in a junior school toilets, but grown-ups prefer comedy that isn't, literally inspired by comments scrawled on a toilet door. If you like Doom Eternal, then good for you. I know lots of people who love it, and that's fine. I like dressing up in Spider-Man jimmy jammies and watching naked midget mud wrestling. It's a beautiful and diverse world, and we can all be who we want to be. But I personally thought Doom Eternal was a desperate last gasp to keep the franchise rolling. Oh, and then they tried to sneak Denuvo anti-cheat onto everyone's systems in an update. Think about that. Kernel-level anti-cheat that can disrupt your entire fucking PC performance permanently. And they installed it without asking permission or warning you if you had auto-updates on this game turned on. That is tight. On a positive note, rumour has it that id Software and Bethesda are already working on the Doom Eternal sequel. Doomville. It's going to be a mobile app where you have to grow crops and trade them in for bullets whilst jumping between platforms. Doomville will launch with the new much anticipated sister mobile app Doombot. This app will allow Doom Eternal fans to immediately spam anyone that dares to criticise their beloved game with pre-selected comments. Here's a small selection. 1. You have Parkinson's disease. 2. You're just like Dean Takahashi. 3. Some random disability comment. Actually, that's not a selection. That's all the options. Because they're the only comments they make. Parkinson's, Dean Takahashi, and disability. Basically, it's just like their comments now, only with Doombot, fanatical Doom fans can do this shit with the press of one button without having to suffer the inconvenience of rummaging around amongst their cum socks to find their jizz-drenched keyboards first. But now it's time to announce the winner of the worst video game of 2020. And winning by a neck, a big, fat, gristly, ox-like steroidal neck, is The Last of Us 2. Who would have thunk it? This game was despicable on so many levels. I don't know what you would call a beast that was a werewolf crossed with a social justice warrior, but this game is that beast. The Last of Us 1 was one of the most critically acclaimed and loved games ever. The Last of Us 2 saw the game transform into its antithesis. The most beloved character was killed off. It became about identity politics and not moral dilemmas. People were arbitrarily good or bad because politics and because worldviews. They retconned their own franchise to cuck the hero and villainise him. The marketing deliberately deceived the audience, hiding certain plot events because they knew damn well the truth would crush sales. Oh, and let's not forget the mainstream media 10 out of 10 supermarket sweep. Then Sony and Naughty Dog abused DMCA legislation and threatened the very livelihoods of creators by copyright striking their channels just for being critical of the game. As is clear from the interviews with Neil Druckmann, creative director of Last of Us 2 and fake woke self-appointed king of the simps, criticism of this game was positioned as bigotry long in advance of the release. Yes, the message was clear. This game is about diversity, and if you criticise this game in any way, you therefore hate diversity. Just because I criticised The Last of Us 2 in my review, the video was demonetised, I was flagged for hate speech, my channel was audited, and after many, many months, I managed to finally get the hate speech sanction removed from the channel, although it's fucking inexplicable how this whole situation went down anyway, because 1, the accusations were factually a lie, and 2, there was absolutely zero supporting evidence to support the accusations. But you know, this is Silicon Valley. Just having bad thoughts is enough to get you into trouble these days. Sorry, I'll correct that. To be more precise, just other people accusing you of having bad thoughts is enough to get you punished these days. Setting all of this aside, however, whatever your social and cultural opinions are, The Last of Us 2 is conspicuous for also being shit based solely on video game standards alone. It's basically everything good about the first game, regarding it being essentially a murder simulator, but literally everything else about the game is bad. They turned the likeable characters into fucksticks, it emasculated the hero, replaced him with a steroidal golfer person, someone of unspecified gender. Their words, not mine. Men became red shirts or sperm donor bolt-on plot accessories. Ellie became an annoying little precocious, ungrateful brat. And the most unlikable characters in the game are the ones they're trying to put in the most positive light. This game comes across like someone with daddy issues seeking therapeutic relief by channeling hatred into a video game story and shitting on people for being straight, male, or old. The plot was probably a collaboration between Big Red and Anita Sarkeesian. And what was the moral of this story? Revenge is bad. What? Ellie carves a path of fucking bloody carnage across the world like a little Vlad the pint-sized ninja impaler. Yet the one person she doesn't kill is the person who literally murdered her father figure. I mean, what? Setting aside the fact that Ellie letting Abby off the hook further diminishes Joel as a character, it also fails to comply with basic common sense. The moral of this story is casual murder of randos and innocent bystanders is mundane busy work. Slaughtering random strangers is just business as usual. But if you spend weeks hunting down the person who killed your surrogate dad, killed one of your best mates, and gave another mate brain damage, well, just as you're about to dispatch that fucker, this is the precise moment you should have an epiphany. Decide that revenge is bad, show mercy, and let them go. A moment, incidentally, a few seconds after the murdering bitch just bit several of your fingers off. Abby was probably literally picking bits of finger flesh out of her back teeth and thinking, lol, I get let off and I got free snacks. The Last of Us 2 is not just a bad game, it is literally the blueprint for how to destroy a franchise. It is the textbook example of how not to make a sequel. Naughty Dog and Sony win Worst Video Game of 2020 for The Last of Us 2. And their prize is a copy of Customer Service for Dummies. And this leaflet on steroid abuse. I was trying to think of a way to best summarise the video game industry shitshow that was 2020, and eventually I realised I should just share this one hard truth with you. When I was making this video, I decided to double check I hadn't missed out on any really shit video games from 2020. So I decided to quickly have a scan through the Video Game Awards nomination lists for any terrible games I might have missed. When I have to check the industry awards lists for best games to make sure I haven't forgotten any of the shittiest games, that perfectly sums up how deranged this industry has become. China's influence on video gaming is still continuing unabated. I keep banging on about this not only because this is some really dark shit, but it's directly affecting the version of the world gamers see in video games. In both subtle and unsubtle ways, publishers are bending to China's will. On one hand, we have little historical inaccuracies and changes creeping into games. But even more sinister is that all video games must never mention certain things, or they will get banned in China, and risk the publisher's very existence as an operator inside the country. Tiananmen Square, the invasion of Tibet, the ethnic cleansing of the Uyghurs. God help you if you bring that up. Unlike other nations, China's political establishment and their corporate institutions operate in absolute harmony, both business and government working together to increase their grip on the industry, whilst grabbing everybody's data and quietly silencing critics of the regime. It initially seems abstract, and maybe I sound like I'm dragging politics into video games, but it is precisely the opposite. Politics is being force-fed into our video games, and most companies are doing fuck all to resist it, because the payday's too good. It's not just about Blitzchung getting banned from esports. It's not just about certain games being banned from stores because they were made by a Taiwanese developer. It's the whole consolidated encroachment of Chinese spying and censorship pervading video games via their proxies. And by proxies, I obviously mean their business partners, like Epic Games, Ubisoft, Activision. Most people would puke their Cocoa Puffs across the table if the morning news was censored by Beijing. But our video games, if made by a Western company doing business in China, is running approval of their products past Chinese censors. And when they forget, like with the Call of Duty Cold War Black Ops promo trailer where they showed a tiny clip of Tiananmen Square, there is big trouble. They got a slapping for that, and the trailers were banned in China. Gamers want decent priced games that are original, fun and entertaining. The publishers have decided for us that we need to be trained, like Pavlov's dogs, to accept shit, unfinished piles of fuck, chock full of monetization and pedo caches, and permeated with preachy progressive identity politics. They not only want to turn video games into psychometric tools for accessing our personal data and stripping all of our money out of our wallets, they want to politically re-educate us too, to make the video game world more marketable to advertisers. They want us to become as woke as Silicon Valley and pay for the privilege so that they can earn even more money. That's like someone mugging you, and then the mugger starts lecturing you about putting your personal pronouns in your Twitter bio. Gamers don't like this abusive monetised shite, so the industry is waging an ideological war on us to change us into the target audience that best suits them. And I use the term ideological war deliberately, because they hire armies of public relations manipulators and gambling psychology specialists to achieve this task. When there is an army of fucks intent on doing us ill, I'm pretty sure using the term war is not hyperbole. On a happier note, 2021 has already proven to be a phenomenal year for independent video games, with several brilliant games released already. Reviews incoming. So I am being genuinely sincere when I say, do not despair at all of this bad news. There will always be passionate people making great video games. I just think that the best games will mostly not be coming from the mainstream industry from now on. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.